and welcome to another episode of the Grow Your Occupancy podcast, Pride Edition, one of my favorite months of the year. June, celebrating Pride, LGBTQ, which we celebrate all people, always. Welcome to the show, Melinda Haney. She's going to share with us a little bit about her story. But first, Melinda, welcome.
Of course. Always good to see you, Julie.
So I love your logo. Tell us a little about you and what you do.
Of course. I am part of the Grow team, and I am always so excited to promote Grow Your Occupancy. And of course, I really love to be a part of the senior living organization and the wonderful successes that I've had over 20 years of just being a part of the senior living industry. So it is really a lovely group of people, as we all know, and that's how we know each other.
Yes. So, yeah, I was going to say it's been about 20 years. Melinda and I met in senior living. I was a sales director and I wanted to meet Melinda because we lived in the same town and she was like uber successful and kept her building full. And I wanted to know all of her secrets, and you were so generous to share them. And today I wanted to ask you just a little bit, and you were kind enough to say you'd sort of share your journey with us and celebrating Pride Month.
Absolutely. And I actually laughed when you asked me to do this, because my first question was kind of like, sure, and why? And I laughed because I don't think of myself necessarily as the rainbow gay individual that is out there, promoting necessarily the individual pride of being gay, but I'm necessarily always out there saying that we should all be so abundantly proud of who we are as individuals and the rights to be able to love who we want to love and have the right to be individually who we want to be. So that I've always thematically believed in throughout my entire life.
I agree 100%. It's not necessarily, like you said, needing to march in a parade, but I'm very grateful for those that do, for all of our rights. It's really the right to be human. It was celebrated every day. Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of the way, well, I know that is the way I was raised. I know for a fact, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and I had neighbors of all different races, and we grew up in a melting pot of different religions, and we grew up with respect and the ability to learn from each other. My brother is a doctor of philosophy, so I laughed that we argued over the comic strips, and I learned that you debated all different things. Sometimes I did end up in the bathroom. I laugh as a kid, crying over my cornflakes because I definitely lost the argument. But we talked about things, and I really think that that's one of the things that we maybe lose out by not talking about our differences. We lose out on not always understanding how people are different and how rich our lives can be if we realize how embracing each other's differences, we can really learn to love each other.
Yeah, because we're differences and similarities. We're all human, right? And so isn't part of being human learning about others and loving the humanness in one another?
Yes, and how culturally diverse can be so interesting. Yeah, so incredibly interesting.
Yes. Now, when I met you, you had two young sons. My daughter and your youngest son are the same age, and now they're grown adult young men. And yes, and you were married. And if you don't mind just sort of sharing, you talked about maybe having that background and that familial background of acceptance, which is wonderful. Many people don't. They either have the opposite, or maybe it's like with mine, for instance, it was neutral. I mean, we didn't talk about much of anything, honestly, but it wasn't a change, or differences weren't bad. Although I grew up in a very white, suburb, the suburbs, right? So,
Mhm.
but it was nothing was bad, different religions or races, but we didn't discuss uh, gay, LGBTQ, nothing. But I just grew up with everybody's everybody. I don't know. So it's great that you were able to, that your family gave you that basis and that foundation.
Right. I think that the LGBTQ, obviously, we have seen in this last 15 years or more, it's bubbled up to the top in all of our maybe childhoods. It wasn't discussed, but I don't think it was not accepted. I don't remember a lot of people maybe being gay and talked about, but I don't at all remember in my childhood where I would have had people, my parents, people that I respected being negative, so I was very, very blessed in that way. But generationally, otherwise, very accepted about so many other types of individuals. And I think that it's so much broader than just one topic. It's about being raised in a multicultural, multi-diverse, accepted community. And I believe that where I was raised in Bury, Ohio was I was very lucky that way. And now, in some ways, you do have to see some people maybe not treated as well as they should be. And that also teaches you something. And then you do learn that that's wrong, right? And that we have to grow from that. And we saw that too. So it's all in perspective. You have to learn what is not right, and you grow from it. And I think that generationally we've seen that. That's where the LGBTQ has bubbled up to the top.
Mhm.
And I think we can be really proud of the growing youth is becoming more acceptable. It's becoming more common to not marginalize it. And that's where the growing acceptance of LGBTQ and the common conversation like we're having now is really wonderful. It's just we're talking about it.
Yeah, with that can come the challenge. Like you said, we grew up probably in the similar time, and we didn't, it wasn't anything negative. It wasn't anything, we just didn't talk about it. My girlfriend and I were talking about movies, and I think I even wrote a podcast about Stranger Things, and the season before last, one of the main characters came out as gay, and the new character played by Maya Hawke, her name is Robin in Stranger Things. And Steve, I think, had a kind of a crush on her. They worked in the ice cream store, and she came out to him in the bathroom, and he was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And this was 85, I think it was, Stranger Things that takes place. And what I said to my daughter was, that is not, that's fakey, because in 1985, that discussion probably wouldn't have happened. We would like it to be, that's true. But
Mhm.
not saying no one had those conversations, but she probably wouldn't have said anything, especially in a movie, and we just, like you
Right.
said. So I think
Oh,
that,
correct.
yeah, with social media and the uh,
Mhm.
certainly the celebrities, 1997, when Ellen came out on her show, the
Yeah,
97, that's not that long ago,
not that
was
long ago.
she's kind of ostracized in her career, etc.
Correct.
And Rosie O'Donnell was, didn't come out
Hardships.
talk show, right?
Hardships.
So with that also comes the bubbling up of the negative, right? So we're hearing
It does.
voices louder. Did you have any personal challenges with your journey, and,
Yeah.
that, yeah.
I think that there's two different types of approaches. I think you have the people who are more comfortable where you have the pride flags that you're on your car and maybe your license plate, and you put a pride flag on your house, and that is displaying it without speaking of it, right? And then that it's out there in front of the conversation. The people who are maybe more like myself, we end up maybe needing to come out every day or choose not to, right? And sometimes it's awkward. It's, maybe 3 weeks into a conversation with somebody or months into working with someone. You have to correct the conversation where they're asking you over and over and over again to bring your husband to dinner. And then you have to say, I need to correct that, so you have to make the determination somewhere else to correct or to see where they are in the test of it, because some people are very prejudiced still.
Sure,
Or
sure. Like you
they're going
said,
to be fine with it.
come out every day. I've had that conversation on this podcast and others. I mean, my daughter, test the waters, testing the waters. And just because we've come a long way in some aspects, I believe we really have. I believe we've gone backward too. And maybe that's because the conversation is just more visible, right? In social media and etc. But I would assume, and it's a bummer, but I would assume that because heterosexuality is sort of the baseline, sort of the assumption,
the norm,
right?
It's the norm.
I know I hate to say normal, but like that baseline, right? So you say as your wife or as your husband or your spouse or he, those kinds of things are the assumed. I don't think necessarily that someone thinks that being gay is wrong. That's just the baseline, but you don't
It's the baseline.
know, right? It's something that I can't relate to because, any minority, right? And any minority with LGBTQ, it's not a skin color, right? So that's when you walk into, if you're a minority physically from the outside, but I'm sure you have to sort of read the room. Right. And like you said, week into it, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and can you just kind of gauge who, like, I don't know if I can really.
And I'm honest to tell you, sometimes it's just not worth my energy. I mean, what is it really worth the perspective of the additional conversation? Or is it worth going there with a referral source?
That's interesting.
Is it really just worth the additional drama? Is it personal versus work? It's one of those things that you just do gauge, right? And then there's the other opposite of, I've had people like in a medical office say, oh, I'm so sorry, ma'am, but we have your insurance wrong, because maybe my dental insurance has my wife's name on it.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm like, yeah, no, that you have my right insurance. And they're like, no, it's wrong. And until they get it, I'm like sitting there saying, no, that's my wife's insurance card and I'm on her policy. And all of a sudden they're like, oh. So there's different ways that it weaves through the culture that will become more and more normal.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. It's one conversation at a time. But to your point, you or no one really isn't necessarily appointed being the teacher of, but like again, Ava was saying that if she can open those sort of conversations or doors for people who I mean, this sounds so unbelievable in 2023, but who've never met a gay person and growing, she grew up in her older teenage years in here where we live, which and now again, more out and proud and all those things, but it's not the, like a big city with, more diversity and things like that. So what about your sons? Do you mind telling me a little bit, like how did they work this journey, or was it like, yeah, no big deal? because I mean, a
think
divorce has got to be tough no matter what, right? And then,
divorce is tough no matter what.
yeah,
There's absolutely no doubt about that.
yeah.
I think that they probably both have different journeys. My younger son would probably be pretty charismatic and probably have a pretty funny dialogue. Heaven forbid we have Tyler on here. There might be some beeps and some hashtags to his comments. But he's incredibly forthright, and he's kind of pretty funny about how he has two moms and a dad, and he's pretty out there. And I think he takes great advantage of having three parents and financial advantage of having three parents.
Hey,
Yeah. He's all about it. So it's
love
good.
it. Love it.
Yeah. I think for Evan, who is the older, I think it was probably, he would never, I don't think he was ever ashamed of it. I think he was more like, let's go with the flow and figure this out. More pacing it, just seeing how this felt. But I do think that my ex-husband and I were cautious. We knew that the kids meant a lot to both of us. And we are still a front. We are still the parents. So when I went to school with them, it was Bob and I. We still did things as the ex-husband and ex-wife together. So it's a bit different. I do think that it's important that kids have parents. And if they are two fathers or two mothers, they are still their parents.
Or
Because
one, but the fact that you and your ex-husband, in this case Bob, are a united front, and that that's got to be so incredibly helpful and supportive, and your children are lucky that you've put them first always, right? And considered,
yes,
again, divorce, no matter what the situation is it's a change. It's a major change, and kids are
it's a
resilient
major
and all that, but
change.
it's
And
gonna stay,
we all went to counseling. I had a great counselor. My kids had different counselors than I did. And I will say that this is really no different than other choices that you make in life. I mean, divorce is no different, right? You make a choice.
right.
I'm not asking for people's permission.
Yeah.
So if they don't really like it, I'm not asking for my neighbor's permission to do this.
Sure.
It's really about their well-being. My children's well-being was first and foremost.
Yeah. And that when your intention, anytime our intention is whatever it is, that comes through. It comes through in everything that we do and we say, whether we mean it to or not, because it's our intention. And so if they're the priority, and now it's got to be, now, how long have you been married? I guess I'm asking two questions, because when did gay marriage become legal in your state?
We were married in 17. So I think it was
Okay.
legal a couple of years before that.
Okay. And you've been together for longer than that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, let's cross our fingers. Don't want to get political, but let's cross our fingers that our human rights stay where they are as far as our human rights, certainly.
Correct.
Do you mind sharing, Melinda? And we're almost out of time, but what two things? What would you like people to know or think about? I wanted to ask you that, and I also wanted to ask you what, if you could share maybe your greatest challenge, either through coming out, making a change, because everyone's story is unique, but you were slightly older when and you lived in a relatively not small town, but really where a lot of people, right? Getting that come into consideration, like you said, you don't need anyone's permission, but this is a major change. People do like to the gossipy, and they're in each other's business all the time. So maybe your greatest challenge, maybe, and then what would you like people to know?
I think my greatest challenge was realizing, because everybody needs support, right? You need support when you make a change, and you need support from those that you love and you respect to take care of yourself. You know, things will change when you make a big choice. And the divorce was the one. Then choosing a different direction in where I would choose who I loved differently was another. But the biggest challenge I faced was when you do something like that is how it changes other people's lives and how they don't like it.
Interesting.
That was my biggest choice. I didn't recognize that when you change directions and everyone else's patterns change, that's where they don't like it. Good friends, I lost good friends. I, had people talk poorly about me because of my choice. And that was difficult. That was very difficult. So it takes great strength to really know if it was what you really want and what you really need personally, if you really need to stay that course. So I think there's just a lot of self reflection on that. The other I would say is that I have great faith in our youth and in our next generations. And I think that some of the current level of dialogue that's going on is because of the high expectations that they have and the high respect I have for our youth, is that they are going to change how we look at the future. They're accepting things that we have never accepted. They are moving forward and they're challenging our generations, no different than we challenged the generations before us. And so some of the dialogues that we're seeing are being fear-led. They're all based on fear. And I don't think that the generations that are coming up are going to make the same choices that we're seeing being made now. So that's what I feel very optimistic. I don't really like all of the things that I'm hearing in the dialogue right now, but I don't really believe that the generations behind us will continue with the level of fear that it is, because I think they are fear-led. I think incorporating the LGBTQ dialogue into our cultural norms is going to continue. And I think that the children of our generations coming up are going to continue to welcome the LGBTQ community into our culture.
Melinda Haney, thank you so much for joining me today, sharing your story. I'm going to end on that because, boy, from your lips, right? Thank you all very much for joining us for a Pride edition of Grow Your Occupancy. If you'd like to learn about what our team, Melinda included, do to support senior living sales, join us on www.growyouroccupancy.com. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.